Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining the latest instalment in our Return to Work series. Today, we will be discussing how to optimize hybrid work policies with workplace data. To kick things off with, I'm just going to briefly outline things we're going to go through today. First up, to bring everyone up to speed, I'm going to kind of provide some context around what we mean when we say hybrid working and the benefits that this brings to organizations that introduce it. Then I'll hand over to our panelists for the day, Lucy Fox of OpenSensors and Lhoest of Veldhoen & Co. And they'll take you through some of the tools and technology required for this to be a successful process. And that will be focusing quite a lot on technology and policy and how the two need to be combined to successfully create a framework. And then the main body of the presentation as such will be a discussion between the two of them around a couple of key challenges that we've seen teams encountering as they reopen offices, and then how to leverage policy and make sure that policy is helping teams deliver on the workplace that they've set out to create. So first off, I'm just going to hand over to Lucy and Louis to introduce themselves and give a bit of background as to why they're here and why they think these ideas are important. Lucy, if you could kick off with that, that'd be great.
Hi there. My name is Lucy Fox. I work at OpenSensors. Throughout my entire career, I've always worked in organisations where analytics and insights and bringing data together is at the heart of everything that they do. At OpenSensors, being able to see how we can aid a workplace's safety and well-being and monitoring how's the best way to be able to support the workplace moving forward. It's a really exciting time now, given all the challenges that we face and how the future is going to look, to be able to capture that data, bring that insight together and be able to make actionable decisions off the back of it. So although this has been a challenging time for everybody, it's an interesting time from a workplace perspective from here on in.
Thank you very much. Over to you, Louis.
Thank you, Sam, for having me today. Well, my name is Louis and I work for a company called Veldhoen Company, and we are helping organizations globally, in fact, to rethink the way they work and to translate that into what that implies for the work environment, for technology and for behaviors and leadership style. And we've been doing that for more than 25 years with also a vision called activity-based working, which is more alive than ever today, as we have moved into a complete new world. And myself, I've been working on these kind of projects for larger organizations and smaller organizations, so on all sizes, in Europe, in Australia, in the Americas, in Scandinavia as well. So there's a lot happening today, and the COVID has really pushed the thinking a step further of what was already happening.
Awesome, thank you guys. Before I hand over to Louis and Lucy for the main discussion, I just kind of wanted to bring everyone up to speed on what it is that we mean by hybrid working. And as the name of it would suggest, it's kind of a way to blend together multiple work styles and enable all employees to work in the way that they so choose. So kind of expanding the workplace outwards to include the home for those that want to work remotely, but then also providing the correct array of spaces within the office itself so that all work styles are facilitated and people are safe to work in the way that they so choose, when they choose, safe in the knowledge that they are organizationally supported from the top down. And this means that organizations are providing them with the necessary tools to work where they want and how they want, the training to do so, and then the general idea that they are able to work in the way that they want. It's kind of a cultural shift as well, that people are better off working how they want. And that's a big factor in being able to deliver on their work, really, and just getting the most out of their working life. So hybrid work environments are they're designed to promote collaboration amongst people and get the best out of people, facilitate all work styles, and very importantly at the moment, with including remote work in a kind of working strategy, is keeping occupancy and capacity at a safe level within office environments. It's emerged as a result of COVID-19, really, in terms of keeping capacity low and safeguarding the health and safety of employees. And this is going to be a big feature for all teams really going forwards, is employee safety. So moving on now to the kind of tools and systems we need. We've spoken previously in webinars about the technology, so occupancy solutions, booking systems, mobility profiles, but today we're going to look a lot more as well at policy and how these need to be introduced in tandem and how it can't be a free-for-all system. Louis, if you could kick us off with what you think needs to be introduced for these systems to be successful and where teams' priorities need to be lying.
Well, what's very nice about what's happening is that it's not new. So we're now talking about something called hybrid working, and you already mentioned that working from home is one of the options nowadays. It's in fact, to date, it's mostly the option to work from home, and sometimes we are able to go to the office if really needed. In fact, before the pandemic started, this trend was already happening where organizations were rethinking their way of working and to include different places to work from, including home. And in project we've done a long time ago, even in the year 2000, a Dutch insurance company started with working from home on a larger scale, where people would be able to work from home 1 or 2 days a week, contracted as such, in a completely different setting than today. And so the good news is that to date, we have the possibility to do that because everybody has seen and learned that we can work from home, that people are productive, that they can be trusted, and that we need to do, of course, things to enable that better, but that's possible. And what you have on this slide, which is about the tools, is, of course, we need tools to give us data, how to manage that in a proper way, and how to inform us to make the right decisions on the topic of who works from home, who works in the office, how do we make sure that the office is safe for people, that there's not too many people, not too few people. But the basis for that is firstly defining how do we want to use the office and what are the rules of engagement that make us thrive as an organization or as a team. So that's the starting point, and then the tools will help us. But I think, Lucy, you can tell us far more about tools as well.
Thank you, Lou. But also, it's a good point to raise as well. I think there's purposes as to the technology that can be used to support, and I think that became quite evident. Certainly, I can talk from a UK and Europe perspective. In sort of the summer of 2020, when offices started to open and more of those rotation workers started to come back, it became quite an administrative burden. It became logistically quite challenging of who was going to be in the office when, how long were they going to be there for, cleaning regimes, all those different things. And it became a number of different people involved in the organisation having to manage that. So this is where technology can really help. And if we think about how our world's going to be moving back, you know, we talk about the phases of rotation of coming back into work, and we've got very familiar with sort of the phase 1s and phase 2 of those that have to be in the office because either they cannot do their job from home or they struggle for technical reasons or personal reasons to work from home. But the phase 3 is pretty much that hybrid flexible working group, which is the largest group that's going to be going back and forth to the office. So from a technology perspective, to be able to, certainly in the foreseeable future, manage, track and trace, making sure that it's easy to understand if anybody's at risk, or from a safety perspective, but also how people are going to interact with the environment as they come back into the office over a period of time. And that's where technology comes in as well. And from my perspective, I think gathering that data as you go can also help shape, change and amend policies as things move forward. And actually, Louis, I was going to have a quick question on this point, actually. There were a number of people already on the activity-based working journey, and certainly some of the interactions I had with organisations, this is, you know, before COVID and our change in working environment, is even though they had adopted it, they hadn't necessarily adopted it across the entire organisations. There were still departments or pockets that almost weren't brought into that fold. And so I'm just wondering, I still see in some instances maybe a bit of a cultural shift or how that works. Is that something you're seeing? You know, are those organisations going to find it easier, do you think, or they're going to have different challenges?
Yeah, it's you're right. So there is a lot of different ways people implement activity-based working, as it's kind of a buzzword in the market. And then, of course, some things that are implemented as activity-based working actually are not activity-based working, but more a flex office. So, which is about sharing desks and reducing the amount of space, whereas activity-based working is far more than that. And it starts with defining as an organization what is the way of working that we want to adopt in relation to our values, in relation to our business drivers, which is a a leadership decision, and it gives a direction for solutions before solutionizing, before jumping into the variety of work settings or in the way you're going to use them. And that is important because that sets a foundation for all parts of the organization to then implement it for different areas of the organization in different ways, because it's not about one size fits all, but it's about a principle, about the fact that you support people to do what they need to be able to do in the best way by providing variety and choice in settings, in technology, and adapting your rules of engagement to that. That is what makes it work and makes it thrive. And that's also where the tools again come in, where the tools should support that, but not start to own the solution or direct the solution. And like with booking systems, as booking systems are becoming directing how you use space, you're probably one step too far, because most organizations, you want people to own how they use the space, and you want tools to support them in that way. And in order to be able to implement it as such, you need to have those conversations with leadership, but also with reference groups in the organization to firstly define how do we want to work and what are the activities we need to support in what way.
I'd 100% agree with that, Louis, as well. I think it's very much got to be an aid to help the business and help those in the business be able to be supported for the tasks they're doing. And I think coming back, everyone's going to be a little bit more deliberate about why they are choosing to work in a certain environment. But where I think booking is really important is if I'm going to have to make the decision, or if I choose to make the decision to travel into the workplace, I at least want to know that I can fulfill the certain tasks that I need to go there to do. I think that could alleviate a lot of frustrations, but it's learning from previous history. So we learn from mistakes of people block booking meeting rooms and causing that frustration. So using, for example, technology that auto releases if people don't turn up, that's the type of things that I think will help aid. But I also agree that you can't move away, and I don't think you should move away from that sort of flexible space of collaboration, or it's it's spare of the moment. You catch somebody and you can catch up with somebody, so sort of touch point areas and elements that, so not everything is under a strict booking regime.
Yeah, I like what you say about the use of the tool. For me, it's very much connected to something that is a key topic with all our clients at the moment, and that is how do we ensure that we can collaborate with the office because we're there at the same time. And that has a lot to do with how do you organize and who makes the decision when to be in the office. That cannot be only a decision on individual level. It can't only be a decision on organizational level. So it needs a continuous dialogue between individuals and their teams to make their teams work and be able to collaborate and be together at given times in the office, not just for a meeting, but on a whole day, for example, and have these serendipitous encounters. It, on the other hand, needs the individual to be able to make those choices without having a huge set of rules, which will never be enough because every rule will create a new one. And those conversations are the ones to have at this point in time within teams, within organizations, and then adapt how you apply the technology to the way you want that to work. That is the key element for success that this new hybrid working will ask from us, and that's also where we support organizations to do it.
It seems like a good time to move on to the next section, which is actually looking at some of the areas we've seen kind of bumps in the road as such. So to kind of provide some context behind what you've been saying before, Louis, what kind of steps can you relate to in these problems with what we were just talking about in regards of policy and technology combining to achieve an end goal?
Well, there are a number of things like if you look at the elements that you have on this slide, like capacity management, it's important to make a distinction between the COVID period, which we're still in, where there's still restrictions, limitations in social distancing, where you have to wear a mask, where there's some issues probably with commuting to the office and so on, and the moment that we will be able to free flow to the office again, and without social distancing, interact with people in the office. Because a number of activities will be far better supported in the office and create that sense of belonging, create this sense of community, create this dynamics at the point that there's no social distancing. In the meantime, those activities, some of those are still not really well covered in the office because you can't be there. And the system for capacity management will be focused on making sure that people are healthy and safe in the office and keep distance, and so limited capacity. In the future, the capacity management will be more there to help people to find out where they can work and where there's space available and so on, and less about making sure that people do not come to the office, because that's in the end what you don't want. You would like to create something where there is always a place for people to come.
I agree on that, actually, and that's also why I'm measuring this. So we've been had a lot of conversations around what types of space will people engage with? How do we make sure there's enough of the right space to ensure it is a place that people want to come back into and want to engage with as well? But at the moment, it's a journey thing as we come out of sort of the COVID social distancing world. I think there's a whole bunch of measurements that we almost need to capture, which are, as you start going back to the office, there's the initial new, it's a familiar surrounding, but it still feels quite new. It's an odd sensation going back in to suddenly and very, very quickly will be familiar. And then when it's familiar, you will be, the sanitizers won't stand out anymore, the pictures won't stand out anymore, reminding you of social distancing. And that's an area of critical time, I think, to watch from impact of occupancy and environmental factors, where we know that that's, as we increase occupancy, that will have an impact on the environmental factors. So measuring and understanding those and capturing that is really key. As we come out of that, understanding how people engage with the office, and agree with you, the workplace is a place we want people to connect with. So therefore, if you can't understand how people are interacting with that space, you can't make sure that you remain relevant and fit for purpose, if you like.
We speak quite a lot internally about fostering resilience within the workplace and kind of moving away from rigid styles of work where it's one-to-one desk ratios. It's kind of like a one-size-fits-all. But we're moving into an environment where COVID-19 realistically isn't going anywhere anytime soon, and there might be seasonal fluctuations, new variants as we've seen. So we kind of need a workplace which can then adapt and flex to these changes in circumstances. I would say the data that we gather, that can be gathered in the workplace, will then inform on these policies, and they both need to feed into one another.
What I would say as well is I think it was briefly talked about before around policies, and people are saying how strict should they be, or does one size fit all? And I think there has to be parameters, because one thing we are very aware of and we're already seeing is there will be flexes globally and regionally as to how offices can interact. So I think having some policies that reflect that, have that flexibility and local autonomy, if you like, to be able to do those changes, because you're going to need, almost certainly we're going to need to. But again, I don't see how you can stay ahead and monitor and engage it quite so well without gathering data and understanding all of that.
And also your remark you made somewhere about the one-on-one assignment of desk to people. There's no one-on-one anymore. It's, from our perspective, already that for a longer time, but COVID has now made really evident and clear that it doesn't make sense to have a one-on-one allocation for everyone in the organization of desk to people, because of the variety of activities we do during a day, because of the fact that we can do them in a lot of different places, and we have all types of other things that we do, which we will not be in the office for. And we can make a far more engaging and productive environment, but also an environment that is really defining and contributing to the purpose of the organization, if we step away from the one-on-one and redefine what is it really we want to do in the office, what is the way of working, the guiding principle for the way of working we want to apply, and then define what the rules of engagement are to do so. And the words that come out in there are very much focused on giving people more self-direction and autonomy, giving them account of responsibility, but with accountability. It doesn't come for free. And enabling people and upskilling their skills to be able to do so. And that is, so that's far more than just workspace. That's about a way of working.
One thing I have noticed as well is that with working policies, it's not just about the environment, but it's also about the personal circumstances of individuals as well. And our home lives have now come very much into the forefront. We're all in each other's homes all the time now with video conferencing. But it's what is the right workplace for one individual may not be for the other. I may choose to work from home from some tasks, but for other tasks, they might not be appropriate, or might not be beneficial for an individual. And it's kind of merging those the policy, so it's not a one size fits all. It has to flow.
Yeah, and it's more than alone those, as you say, those policy, and we're all different. So that's why variety and choice is so important in the office. And the more variety we make, and the more images we bring into the office, the more people will be able to choose those things that really make them thrive within the context of their team and organization. And also, we have to keep in mind that we've been away now for so long from the office. People have to get used to the quality of environment at home, of the focus, of the privacy, of the fact that they can go out, that they are surrounded by things they like, of the food they have at home, and so on. And going back to the office might be a big disappointment for a lot of people coming into an environment which on a number of points will be far less in quality and experience than they might have at home. So we have to rethink how to give people environments that are maybe 1 or 2 levels upscaled to what it was today. And they have to be different. They can't be just desks.
I think you've both briefly touched on it. Was Louis earlier talking about the way that rules and policies can kind of throttle and strangle working environments, but then one of the things that we're seeing data be used for is identifying problem areas, especially with booking. So identifying mass bookings months in advance and no-shows and stuff. And obviously the idea is that you gather this data and then you can fine-tune the processes by introducing policy. For people looking to try and find that balance between control and freedom, where would you say is kind of the best place to start, Louis? Or is there a perfect balance, or is it something that's kind of going to have to be a constant working process?
Yeah, there are different approaches, of course, to that. We have clients in which we apply a kind of a continuous learning approach. So which means that we define kind of guidelines that drive how to implement things or what to create. But those guidelines are in fact reassessed every month to month. And they changed a bit in wording, they changed a bit in the intent, they changed a bit in the how. And by that, they evolve over time and are fit for purpose and help people to drive their own decisions, because that's in the end what you want. Every rule you make, every policy you make is, on the one hand, sometimes necessary, on the other hand, it limits and restricts, and it's always timely. And it will always need a new rule or a new policy over time. Whereas if you use people's capacity and ability to self-organize within a certain boundary, within a certain direction, you can channel their energy, their actions, their creativity in a way that is conducive to everyone.
It's going to be no surprise to me that I'm going to say, without capturing it to understand what's happening, then I don't know how you can look to do those things without a lot of surveying and canvassing or subjective data as to how that works. And we've all had challenges over the years working in those environments that we've had frustrations with. So being able to take those lessons that we learn from that, and I think there's going to be a huge dynamic changing over how people engage with the office now. There'll be pockets of excitement and more people going in depending on where the location is. All those different things are going to play factors. And so capturing it as much and as early as possible, because these policies will be a guideline and they will have to be flexible, and they're going to have to adapt as the workplace and those engaged with the workplace adapt as well.
Yeah, I'm just going to quickly kind of summarize some of the key ideas that we've spoken about here. And I think primarily what's really important is what Louis talks about when he talks about his guiding principles, in that policy and technology are going to be constantly evolving to best fit with what you're trying to deliver. And it's going to be a case of data feeding into policy, seeing the impact of that policy, and then using that data to tweak things going forwards and make sure that you are delivering to your employees what you've set out to create, but you need that vision to begin with. And the uncertain times we're in, demands on capacity are going to change. Basically, even if it's just from safety guidelines being introduced or released, eventual journey back to business as usual, the way we interact with the office is going to change over the next coming years. And the systems that we have in place and the policy surrounding it needs to be flexible enough to adapt to that. And it's the same with health and safety. If things aren't going well, if there are new variants and there are new spikes, we need to be able to quickly identify those trends and those patterns and make sure that the policy that we have in place is adaptable enough and flexible enough to ensure that people are safe, because honestly, that should be everyone's priority as offices reopen. And second, beneath that is employee experience. Like you said the entire way through, Lucy, that workplaces are somewhere that we want people to be. That we want them to remain the heart and the core of a business, but it has to be on people's own terms. And if the systems that are in place aren't working in that way, we want to know about it, and we want to be able to address it. And for that, like you said, we need to know what's going on. You can't fix a problem that you can't see. So that's where we feel the data comes into place. Next up, we've had a couple of good questions come through from people signing up and throughout the presentation. So first, I'll put this one to you, Louis, to begin with. And it's talking about global working policies on a global level, but I'm not sure it necessarily only applies to global companies, but it's how would you go about phrasing remote work policies on an organization-wide level? Like, does it have to be a blanket rule, or can it fluctuate and change?
Yeah, from our perspective, what we've learned with the global companies we're working with is that a foundation is always made based on something you define globally that is based on the values of the organization and the key strategic drivers that are common for the organization globally. And that are translated to what we call guiding principles for how we want to work. Mm-hmm. When you apply that then in different locations, it is very wise to not take that as a given, but take it as a starting point for dialogue with local leaderships to adapt that to the local situation and add to it and sometimes remove something from it that do not make sense in that local setting for whatever reason. So that you create an engagement based on something you've defined globally, but can be adapted locally and then made to work.
And it's something we have to be mindful of, okay? So it's not just around global policies, it's around how it's going to be fluid.
What are the appropriate measures of success for workplace policy in hybrid environments? So I guess how do you know that what you have introduced, other than looking at the data, or even just looking at the data, how do you know what you're doing is working? How do you measure success in these environments?
I think it's how employees are engaging. Is the space fit for purpose? And you can only tell that by how they are engaging within the workplace. And I think, you know, we can't take it away from actually having human interaction, so asking for feedback, asking for how the interaction is, but by engagement, I think is going to be key. Is there the right space for the right type of activities? Have you got that about right? You know, it's how that whole thing evolves. But I'm going to say it again and again, but unless you can measure it, you can't make a decision based on it. But I wouldn't just look at data alone. You've got to understand human behaviours and ask. This is where surveys come into play. There's been lots of surveys around how people feel about coming back to the office, keeping that engagement open. But I think how you measure success is how people are engaging and how people are adopting to it. Are old behaviour patterns creeping back in? And if so, why? Why is that happening?
Mm-hmm. And Louis, what are your thoughts on the matter?
Well, a lot of thoughts, but I think one that really applies specifically to this new hybrid situation is when I think the measure of success is when people really come to the office because they just want to be in the office. So not because they have a specific meeting, not because they feel that it's part of their being to come to the office from time to time. Not to be there every day, but they purposely choose to be in the office whilst they could have done it at home. And that for me would be a big measure of success of the hybrid being working, because it's very easy for us to stay at home and still be quite, let's say, comfortable and start quite satisfied as an employee of what's happening. But when people choose by themselves to go to the office at any given time and have a good experience, that is for me a real nice measure for success.
I think as well, it's choosing to go to the workplace. I'd agree with you, Lou. I think choosing to go back to the workplace, but also being very deliberate about where they're going to perform the tasks. I think that would mean that it's probably working. Would that be right?
Yeah, because that would happen. That would be, let's say, for me, that's kind of that's, if you don't have that, people will not come to the office because what would it offer them?
Yeah.
So it's exactly that. It's because I could do it at home, but I also feel and it's nice because I also see these people, I bump into them, even if they're not my direct colleagues. And I get this sense of what I belong to, which is the company. Because in the end, it's about that sense of purpose you have to feel every day to be able to give the best of yourself to your organization, to yourself.
Awesome. Well, I think we should probably close it up there. Thank you everybody for joining, and thank you Louis and Lucy for your time this afternoon and sharing your expertise and knowledge with us.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.